The Watcher's Feast. In the tenebrous corners of an otherwise mundane bedroom, Michael, a 30-year-old graphic designer with a penchant for late-night work binges, began to suffer the consequences of his relentless insomnia. It was the silhouette in his dreams that first caught his attention. A shapeless figure, charcoal dark, with the barest suggestion of malicious intent simmering in its formless visage. Initially, the dreams were mere flickers, short, inscrutable glimpses of the figure standing at the foot of his bed. But as the weeks progressed and Michael's sleep became more erratic, the figure grew bolder, closer, and more defined. It watched him with unseen eyes, and each morning Michael woke feeling less rested, his energy sapped, his nerves frayed. The boundary between wakefulness and sleep grew indistinct. The figure from his dreams began to appear in his waking hours, at the edge of his vision in the office, in the rearview mirror of his car, in the bathroom mirror as he splashed water on his face to stay awake. Desperate for relief, Michael turned to sleeping pills, meditation, anything to get a full night's rest. But sleep was now a treacherous landscape, and deeper slumber only allowed the figure to approach closer, its presence more oppressive. The insidious realization dawned on Michael that his sleep, or lack thereof, was feeding this entity. It grew stronger with each restless night, thriving on his sleepless anxiety, an incubus of the modern age. He consulted sleep therapists, priests, psychics, anyone who might hold the key to banishing the shadowy leech from his life. Yet their advice proved futile and their remedies ineffective. The entity mocked his efforts, its silent laughter a whisper in his mind. Michael's appearance began to change. His eyes, once bright and lively, were now dull, overshadowed by dark circles. His skin turned pallid, and his actions became lethargic, as if he was already part of the shadow world the figure inhabited. One storm-laden night, as lightning spider-webbed across the sky, Michael faced the entity in his dream, a confrontation that felt inevitable. The figure revealed its nature, a parasitic demon that had latched onto him. Feeding off his life force, it spoke without words, a telepathic intrusion that chilled Michael to his core. The demon made it clear. It was his anxiety, his battle against sleep that gave it strength. To defeat it, he must do the one thing he feared most, to surrender to sleep, to trust in the vulnerability it demanded. With nothing left to lose, Michael let go of his fear and drank a herbal concoction meant to induce deep sleep, one from which he feared he might never wake. That night, as the storm raged outside, the bedroom was filled with an otherworldly cold. The shadow loomed over him, so close he could feel its unnatural chill. But as sleep took him, the figure wailed in silence, starved of the anxiety it needed to survive. Michael slept for days, and when he awoke, the presence was gone. His energy returned, his mind was clear, and his dreams were his own once again. However, the fight had taken its toll. Now, whenever the veil of sleep begins to claim him, Michael can't help but wonder if the shadow awaits his return, hungry and vengeful, in the dream realm where it now lies dormant. Whispers of the Wraithline. In the small, secluded town of Eldritch Hollow, Eleanor, a librarian with an avid love for tales of the macabre, found herself ensnared in a story far more terrifying than any she had ever read. It started with her phone, a smartphone like any other, which began to replay fragments of her past conversations with an eerie delay. At first, Eleanor dismissed these echoes as technical glitches, but the anomalies grew increasingly disturbing. Her own voice was there, certainly, but twisted into alternate scenarios where joy turned to despair and love to loss. And then there was the other voice, a sinister whisper that slithered through the digital crackle, speaking of things that should never come to pass. Eleanor's concern morphed into horror when these dark prophecies began to manifest in reality. A casual chat with her brother about a job interview ended in the echo with a whispered prediction of a fire at his workplace, which occurred the very next day. A conversation with her best friend about a long-awaited date culminated in the echo with the murmured foreshadowing of a tragic car accident that came to pass. It dawned on Eleanor that the voice within her phone was not a mere echo, but something alive. A demonic entity that had found a vessel in the wires and waves of modern communication. With each replayed conversation, it weaved its will into the fabric of the real world, orchestrating calamities with the casual indifference of a child plucking wings from flies. Eleanor tried to rid herself of the phone, but the echoes followed, haunting other devices, jumping from call to call, as if the entity were bound to her very soul. She consulted with occult experts, dabbled in protective rituals, and sought out anyone who had experienced anything similar. But the entity was cunning and elusive, its motives inscrutable. In her quest for a solution, Eleanor uncovered a series of forgotten local legends speaking of a creature known as the Whisper Wraith, a spirit that feeds on potential futures, especially those steeped in sorrow and pain. The only way to banish the Wraith was to confront it, to deny its power by facing one's greatest fears and embracing the very tragedies it sought to bring about. The climax came as Eleanor's own life hung in the balance. A final, chilling echo predicted her demise in a confrontation with the Whisper Wraith. She stood alone, phone in hand, as the night swirled with unnatural fog and the air vibrated with the malice of the entity. With a heart heavy with dread, she answered the predicted call. The Wraith's voice, a cacophony of all the horrors it had whispered before, filled her ears, promising an end to the suffering, an end to all things. Eleanor, with a defiant cry, declared her refusal to succumb to the fate it laid before her. She affirmed her will to live, to endure, to witness a future of her own making, untainted by its corruption. In that moment, the Wraith's power faltered, its whispers dissipating into silence. Eleanor had chosen her path, one of light amidst the darkness the entity so relished. The echoes ceased, the tragedies abated, and though the scars of fear remained, Eleanor knew she had triumphed over the demon that sought to speak ruin into existence. Yet, the victory was not without its price. Eleanor's life returned to a semblance of normality, but the Whisper Wraith's voice lingered in the back of her mind, a haunting reminder that some lines, once crossed, can never fully be severed. The Dweller in the Walls. In the dreary heart of the city, a man named Eric Langley finds himself beset by an oddity in his drab, one-bedroom apartment. Subtle disturbances unsettle his solitary life. A misplaced book, a flicker of shadow, a whisper of movement in his peripheral vision. Eric dismisses these as figments of stress, yet a chilling sensation crawls within him, suggesting that he is not alone. As days meld into nights, the disturbances grow bolder. Food vanishes from his fridge. Heavy breaths echo in silent rooms, and an elusive cold touch brushes past him. He begins to feel eyes upon him, a gaze lurking just beyond sight. The apartment, a place of refuge, turns into a cage with an invisible menace. Driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity, Eric sets up cameras, desperate for proof of his sanity, or confirmation of his greatest fears. The footage reveals nothing, yet the eerie feeling intensifies. The air grows heavier, thick with a sinister intent. One night, a palpable shift occurs. The shadows seem to twist, stretching towards Eric as he tosses and turns in his bed. In his restless slumber, he hears it, a whisper, not in his ear, but inside his mind. Words in an arcane tongue wrap around his consciousness, and an ancient force from beyond the veil of reality creeps into the realm of the living. Eric awakes, but he is changed. His eyes, once a warm brown, now glisten with an abyssal blackness. His smile, once comforting, now a grotesque, unfamiliar curve. The entity within him flexes its newfound form, delighting in the corporeal senses. The presence, a demon long forgotten by time and lore, named itself in forgotten whispers as Nexel. It sought a vessel, and in Eric's vulnerability, it found a perfect host. It feeds on his life, his essence, his very soul. Neighbors start to whisper of Eric's odd demeanor, his gaunt appearance, and his inexplicable knowledge of their darkest secrets and fears. Some nights, they hear the walls of Eric's apartment vibrate with the sounds of otherworldly chants, as if a congregation of shadows congregates within. Eric Langley is no more. The entity wears his face, walks with his gait, but the man who once lived for simple pleasures is now but a passenger in his own body. Screaming from behind his stolen eyes, forced to observe as Nixel weaves a dark tapestry of influence that begins to seep through the apartment building, the city, and beyond. As the entity enacts its mysterious will, Eric's former self fades, a silent scream in the dark, a warning unheeded, about the unseen horrors that dwell just out of sight, waiting for their moment to enter our world.